Talia stood beside a lawyer in my living room, confidently declaring that I was mentally declining and unfit to manage my own finances. My own son Keaton stared at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes while his wife painted me as a confused old man who needed their help. The lawyer, a stern-faced woman in an expensive suit, turned to me with papers in her hand. "Mr. Keaton, given your age and recent memory issues that your family has documented, do you consent to transferring financial control to more capable hands?" I looked around my own living room, the place where my late wife and I had raised our children, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. Now it felt like a courtroom where I was being judged incompetent. I folded my hands calmly in my lap, smiled, and said simply, "Not today." Talia's confident expression faltered for just a moment. The lawyer looked surprised, probably expecting an elderly man to be intimidated by legal pressure. "I think you misunderstand the situation," Talia said quickly, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. But I could see something in her eyes. Fear. She knew something was off about my response. I stepped back from the chaos unfolding in my living room and turned toward you, the people who would hear this story. Before I tell you how all this started, I need to ask you for a small favor. Write in the comments where you're watching me from, and please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. What I'm about to share with you is something I never thought my own family could do under my roof. I paused, letting the weight of betrayal settle over the room. My name is Keaton. I'm 73 years old, and for the past 6 months, I've watched my daughter-in-law systematically try to steal everything my wife and I worked 40 years to build. Talia shifted uncomfortably behind me, clearly not expecting me to address an audience. This is the story of how betrayal walked into my home, wearing a smile and a concerned expression. How someone convinced my own son that his father was losing his mind. And how I proved that age doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. I turned back to face them, my expression calm but determined. Let me tell you how this really started. It began 6 months ago at a family dinner. Talia patted my arm in front of everyone and said loudly, Tommy gets dates mixed up sometimes. It's so cute how he tries to keep track of everything." Everyone around the table laughed, like it was the most charming thing they'd ever heard. Everyone except me. I hadn't mixed up any dates. I'd simply mentioned that my doctor's appointment was on Thursday instead of Friday, because the office had called to reschedule. But Talia turned my simple correction into evidence of confusion. "Dad's getting older," Keaton said with a nervous laugh. "We all forget things." But I caught Talia whispering to him later, when she thought I couldn't hear. "See? He's definitely slipping. We need to start paying attention to these signs." The way she said it made my blood run cold. This wasn't concern for an aging family member. This was calculation. I started paying closer attention to how she spoke about me, how she treated me, how she positioned every small mistake as evidence of mental decline. That dinner was the first time I realized someone was building a case against my competency, one small comment at a time. Over the next few weeks, I noticed important papers disappearing from my desk. Insurance forms that I'd been reviewing vanished overnight. Bank statements that I kept organized in my filing system were suddenly missing. Even some of my late wife's personal letters that I treasured had disappeared. When I asked Talia about them, since she was the only person who'd been in my study recently, she just shrugged. "You probably misplaced them, Tom. You know how these things happen when we get older." There was that phrase again. When we get older. Like aging automatically meant incompetence. I started keeping track of what went missing and when. The pattern was clear. Anything financial, anything legal, anything that showed I was capable of managing my own affairs. One afternoon, my neighbor knocked on my door looking uncomfortable. "Tom, I don't want to cause trouble," he said quietly, "but I saw your daughter-in-law taking envelopes out of your mailbox yesterday. She had her own key." My stomach dropped. She wasn't just taking papers from my house. She was intercepting my mail. I thanked my neighbor and made my first important decision. I was going to start documenting everything. The public humiliation came at our neighborhood barbecue in front of 20 people. I was having a perfectly normal conversation with friends about current events when Talia appeared at my elbow. She grabbed my arm firmly and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Let's get you inside before you forget where the bathroom is, sweetie." The laughter was awkward and embarrassing. People looked at me with pity, like I was a confused child who needed constant supervision. I wasn't confused about anything. I knew exactly where the bathroom was in my own neighborhood. I knew exactly what Talia was doing. My son Colton stood nearby, saying nothing to defend me. He just looked embarrassed, like I was the problem. As Talia guided me away from my friends, treating me like an invalid in front of people I'd known for decades, I realized something important. This wasn't random cruelty. This was strategic. She was building a public narrative about my mental state, creating witnesses who would remember seeing her take care of her confused father-in-law. Every comment, every public display of concern, every time she treated me like a child was another piece of evidence in whatever case she was building. A week later, Talia handed me a stack of official-looking papers during what seemed like a casual visit. "Just some routine stuff that needs your signature, Tom," she said with a bright smile. "Nothing important, just updating some account information." I took the papers and glanced at the top page. In small print at the bottom, I could see the words Estate Management Authorization. This wasn't routine paperwork. This was a legal document that would give her control over my finances. I handed the papers back to her calmly. "I'll need to read through these carefully later." Her smile tightened just slightly. "They're really not complicated. Just basic updates that need to be filed." "I'm sure they're fine," I said, setting them on my coffee table. "But I've always made it a practice to read everything before I sign it." I could see frustration flash across her face before she covered it with another fake smile. "Of course. Take your time." But she clearly hadn't expected me to hesitate. In her mind, I was supposed to be confused enough to sign whatever she put in front of me without question. That night, I read every word of those documents. She was trying to get legal authority over all my assets. 2 days later, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. Talia was in the kitchen with Colton, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "If we don't get control of his finances soon, his memory could stabilize and we'll lose our chance completely," she hissed. "Memory? What was wrong with my memory? Are you sure about this?" Colton asked weakly. "He seems pretty sharp to me most of the time. Trust me, I've been researching this. People his age go through phases. Right now he's having good days, but that won't last. We need to act while we can still claim he's incompetent." My blood ran cold as I listened to them discuss my supposed mental decline like it was a business opportunity. "What if someone challenges us?" Colton asked. "Who's going to challenge us? He's 73 years old and living alone. Everyone's seen the signs I've been pointing out. No court is going to side with him over his own family." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my phone and started recording every conversation, every interaction, every attempt to manipulate or control me. If Talia wanted to build a case, I would build a better one. The next morning, I called my old friend Leonard Price, an attorney I'd known for 30 years. Leonard had handled my wife's estate and had always been someone I trusted completely. "Tom, you sound worried," he said when he heard my voice. "I think I'm being set up, Leonard. Can you come over?" Within an hour, Leonard was sitting in my living room, listening carefully as I explained everything that had been happening. I showed him the papers Talia had tried to get me to sign, played him some of the recordings I'd made, and told him about the missing documents. Leonard's expression grew more serious with every detail. "Thomas," he said finally, "you're not being paranoid. You're being systematically targeted for financial exploitation. Can they really do this? They can try. And in some cases, they succeed, especially when the victim doesn't have anyone advocating for them." He paused. "But you called me, which means you're thinking clearly and protecting yourself." Leonard leaned forward. "Are you prepared for a long, strategic fight? Because that's what this is going to take." I thought about my wife, about everything we'd built together, about the legacy I wanted to protect. "Yes," I said firmly. "I'm ready." Leonard and I spent the next week building a comprehensive case. We documented every missing piece of mail, every humiliating comment, every forged signature on forms I'd never seen before, and every recording I'd made of Talia's manipulation attempts. "This isn't incompetence on her part," Leonard said as he reviewed the evidence. "This is calculated exploitation. She's following a pattern that suggests she's done research on how to take control of an elderly person's assets." The evidence was damning. Phone records showing calls to financial institutions using my information. Copies of documents with signatures that looked like mine but weren't quite right. A paper trail of someone systematically trying to gain access to accounts they had no legal right to touch. Tom, I need you to understand something important, Leonard said. We could stop this right now by confronting them directly. But if we do that, they'll just change tactics and be more careful. What do you suggest? We let them think their plan is working. We document everything they do. And when they finally make their move in court, we destroy them with their own evidence. He paused, studying my face. But that means you have to endure more of their manipulation and humiliation while we build our case. I thought about it for a moment. How long? Probably a few more weeks. Then that's what we'll do. I decided to confront my son privately, hoping to understand why he was allowing his wife to treat me this way. I caught him alone one evening and asked him directly, Colton, why are you letting Talia do this to me? He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. Do what, Dad? She's just trying to help you manage things. You're getting older, and some of this stuff is complicated. Son, I'm not confused. I'm not forgetting things. And I'm perfectly capable of managing my own finances. It's complicated, Dad, he said, his voice getting defensive. Talia knows about these things. She's good with paperwork and legal stuff. Just let her handle things, okay? There was something in his voice that caught my attention. Not just resignation, but fear. Are you afraid of her? I asked quietly. His eyes widened for a moment before he looked away. That's ridiculous. But I could see the truth in his expression. My son was scared of his own wife. Whether it was emotional manipulation, threats, or something else, Colton was trapped in a situation he felt powerless to change. Son, you know this isn't right. I can't talk about this anymore, he said, walking away. Just, please don't make this harder than it has to be. The next week, I discovered that Talia had scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor without telling me. I only found out because the advisor's office called to confirm the appointment time. I arrived at the meeting unexpectedly, walking into a conference room where Talia was sitting across from a man in an expensive suit, discussing estate transfer timelines and capacity evaluations. The silence that dropped when I entered was deafening. Mr. Keaton, the advisor said, looking confused. I wasn't expecting you. I wasn't expecting not to be invited to a meeting about my own finances, I replied calmly. Talia's face went red. Tom, you said you didn't want to deal with complicated financial planning. I was just getting information for you. Did I authorize you to speak with my financial advisor about transferring my estate? The advisor looked between us uncomfortably. Sir, your daughter-in-law said you had given her permission to explore options for simplified asset management. I gave her no such permission. As we left the building, the advisor pulled me aside privately. Mr. Keaton, did you actually authorize these discussions? Because if not, what just happened in there was highly irregular. I thanked him and told him I would be in touch with clarifications soon. That evening, I called Leonard with the details. Leonard called me the next morning with urgent news. Thomas, someone attempted to access your investment portfolio online yesterday using your login information. The bank flagged it as suspicious activity because the access came from an IP address that wasn't yours. My stomach dropped. Let me guess who that might have been. The bank has security footage of someone using a computer at the public library, trying multiple password combinations to get into your accounts. Can they identify who it was? They're working on it, but we might not need them to. This attempted unauthorized access gives us everything we need to file a protective petition. Leonard explained that attempted financial fraud by a family member was a serious legal matter that courts took very seriously. We now have enough evidence to request emergency protection from financial exploitation, he said. But Thomas, once we file this petition, there's no going back. This becomes a legal battle. What are my options? We can file for a protective order that prevents anyone from accessing your finances without court approval. We can also petition for a competency evaluation that will prove you're fully capable of managing your own affairs. I thought about Talia's confident smirk, about my son's fear, about everything my wife and I had worked for. File everything, I said. Let's end this. Within days, Leonard had filed a comprehensive counterpetition requesting protection from undue influence and attempted financial coercion. The documents outlined everything Talia had done, supported by recordings, witness statements, and expert analysis. What Talia didn't know was that her own petition claiming I was incompetent had triggered an automatic investigation into the circumstances surrounding the claim. The beauty of this, Leonard explained, is that she requested the court date herself. She thinks she's going to walk in there and convince a judge that you're mentally unfit. Instead, she's going to walk into a courtroom where we present evidence of her attempted fraud. The court scheduled both petitions to be heard on the same day, which meant Talia would be defending her claims while facing accusations of exploitation. How confident are you that we can win this? I asked. Thomas, I've been practicing law for 40 years. I've never had a case with stronger evidence. She documented her own crimes while thinking she was building a case against you. I felt a mixture of anticipation and sadness. This was my own family I was fighting against. But I couldn't let them steal everything my wife and I had sacrificed to build. The court date was set for 2 weeks away. Until then, I had to continue pretending I didn't know what was coming. The court required a comprehensive cognitive evaluation before the hearing, which was exactly what Talia had been hoping for. She probably thought a psychological assessment would confirm her claims about my mental decline. I arrived at the evaluator's office prepared to demonstrate that my mind was sharper than she had claimed. The evaluation lasted 3 hours and covered everything from memory tests to problem-solving exercises to financial comprehension assessments. When the results came back, the evaluator asked to speak with me privately. Mr. Keaton, I have to tell you, your cognitive function is remarkable for someone your age. Your memory, reasoning skills, and decision-making abilities are all well above average. In fact, you scored higher than most 50-year-olds. What does that mean for the court case? It means that anyone claiming you're mentally incompetent is either mistaken or lying. When Talia saw the evaluation report, her face went pale. The document she had been counting on to prove my incompetence instead proved the opposite. There must be some mistake, she said to Leonard. He's been showing clear signs of confusion and memory problems. Leonard smiled politely. Perhaps you've been mistaking normal aging for cognitive decline. Or perhaps you've been seeing problems that don't actually exist. That evening, I could hear Talia and Colton arguing loudly in their apartment next door. 2 days before the court hearing, Talia stormed into my house without knocking, her composure completely gone. Why are you making this so difficult? She screamed. I'm trying to help you. Just give up this stupid fight and let us take care of everything. I was sitting calmly at my kitchen table, drinking tea and reading the newspaper. I looked up at her and said simply, no. You're being selfish and stubborn. You're too old to handle these responsibilities. According to the court-ordered evaluation, I'm more than capable of handling my responsibilities. Her face twisted with rage. That evaluation was wrong. You're confused and you don't know what's best for yourself. I continued sipping my tea, not responding to her outburst. If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take more serious steps, she threatened. We can have you removed from this house for your own safety. I looked at her calmly. You're welcome to try. That night, she called Colton over, and I could hear them planning something through the thin walls. They were discussing emergency interventions and family necessity. I called Leonard immediately. They're planning something drastic. Don't worry, he said. Let them try. Everything they do now just adds to our case. My neighbor, who had seen Talia stealing my mail, provided a detailed written statement for Leonard's case file. He had been documenting her activities for weeks, keeping careful notes about dates, times, and what he witnessed. She came to your mailbox at least 6 different times, he told Leonard. She had a key and would take out envelopes, look through them, and only put back the ones she wanted you to see. The neighbor also reported seeing Talia going through my garbage, apparently looking for discarded financial documents or anything else she could use. This level of surveillance and theft shows clear intent to control and manipulate, Leonard explained. No one does this kind of systematic information gathering unless they're planning something significant. The neighbor agreed to testify in court if necessary. Tom's a good man, he said. I've known him for 15 years, and he's as sharp as anyone I know. What that woman is trying to do to him is criminal. Leonard added the neighbor's statement to our evidence file. This just became a slam-dunk case, he told me. I was grateful for neighbors who were willing to stand up for what was right, even when it meant getting involved in a family dispute. The night before the court hearing, I sat alone in my living room, looking at the framed photo of my late wife that I kept on the mantel. I won't let them destroy what we built together, I whispered to her picture. I promise you that everything we worked for will be protected. I thought about all the years we had sacrificed, all the overtime hours and careful budgeting and smart investments that had built our nest egg. We had dreamed of leaving something meaningful to our children and grandchildren. Now our daughter-in-law was trying to steal it all, and our own son was helping her do it. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Leonard. "Thomas, I just got back from reviewing the final evidence package. I found something massive that I want to present tomorrow." "What is it?" "I'll tell you in the morning. But let me just say this. After tomorrow, Talia will never try something like this again." "Are you that confident?" "I've been doing this for 40 years, Tom. This is the most clear-cut case of attempted financial exploitation I've ever seen." I hung up feeling both nervous and hopeful. Tomorrow would determine whether justice or manipulation would win. Leonard's discovery was even more damaging than I had expected. A forensic audit of my financial accounts revealed that Talia had been trying to move money between accounts for months, using forged authorizations and fake power of attorney documents. She's been systematically attempting to transfer assets to accounts she controls, Leonard explained as we prepared for court. This isn't just attempted influence. This is attempted theft. The audit showed multiple unauthorized attempts to access my investments, change beneficiary information, and even apply for credit cards in my name. How is this possible? She's been collecting your personal information for months. Social security number, account numbers, passwords. Everything she needed to impersonate you for financial purposes. Leonard spread out copies of forged documents with signatures that looked like mine but weren't. The bank's handwriting expert confirmed that these signatures are fraudulent. She's been practicing copying your signature. I stared at the evidence of systematic fraud carried out by someone I had trusted in my home. "Leonard, what kind of sentence does someone get for this level of financial fraud?" "If she's convicted, several years in prison." "This isn't a civil matter anymore, Tom. This is criminal." He looked at me seriously. "Tomorrow, she doesn't just lose her case. Tomorrow, she burns." Talia entered the courtroom wearing a white dress and pearls, looking like the picture of innocence. She had her hair perfectly styled and carried herself like a devoted daughter-in-law who was reluctantly forced to protect her confused father-in-law from his own poor judgment. I walked in wearing my best suit, steady and calm, carrying only a simple briefcase. The contrast was intentional. She looked like she was performing for the judge. I looked like someone who was there to tell the truth. Colton sat behind Talia, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact with me. I felt sorry for him, realizing that he was as much a victim of her manipulation as I was. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, reviewed the preliminary documents and looked up at both parties. "This is an unusual case," she said. "We have competing petitions regarding Mr. Keaton's competency and allegations of financial exploitation. We'll hear both sides and determine the truth." She looked directly at me. "Mr. Keaton, you seem alert and coherent today. Are you ready to present your case?" "Yes, Your Honor. I'm ready to tell you exactly what's been happening in my home." Leonard stood up. "Your Honor, we're prepared to present evidence of systematic financial fraud and attempted elder exploitation." Leonard began presenting our evidence methodically, starting with the timeline of Talia's manipulation attempts. He showed the court recordings of her conversations, documents she had forged, and evidence of her theft of my mail and personal information. "Your Honor, Mrs. Keaton has been conducting a calculated campaign to gain control of Mr. Keaton's assets through deception and fraud." He played recordings of Talia discussing strategy with Colton, including her admission that she needed to act before my memory stabilized. The courtroom was silent as my daughter-in-law's own voice filled the room, discussing how to manipulate an elderly man out of his life savings. Leonard presented the neighbor's testimony about mail theft, the financial advisor's statement about unauthorized meetings, and the bank's documentation of attempted account breaches. "Mrs. Keaton has forged documents, stolen mail, attempted to access accounts without authorization, and systematically built a false narrative about her father-in-law's mental state." Talia's face grew paler with each piece of evidence. Her lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable as the scope of her client's actions became clear. "Your Honor, this isn't a case of family concern for an elderly relative. This is a case of attempted financial fraud by someone who targeted a widower for his assets." The judge's expression grew more serious as Leonard continued his presentation. When it was Talia's turn to respond to the evidence, she completely lost control. Instead of presenting a calm defense, she burst into tears and started screaming about how the evidence was lies and manipulation. "He's lying about everything," she sobbed. "He's old and confused, and he's turning everyone against me." The judge slammed her gavel. "Mrs. Keaton, you will control yourself in this courtroom." "You don't understand," Talia continued, her voice rising to a shriek. "I've been taking care of him for months. I've been protecting him from making terrible financial mistakes. Mrs. Keaton, sit down immediately. This whole system is rigged against people who try to help. He's manipulating all of you." Her lawyer tried to calm her down, but Talia was beyond reason. Her carefully constructed image of concerned family member had cracked completely, revealing someone desperate and panicked. "He's too old to make these decisions. Everyone knows that people his age can't handle complex financial matters." The judge ordered a recess, but the damage was done. Talia had destroyed her own credibility with her outburst, showing the court exactly the kind of person she really was. During the break, Leonard smiled at me. "That's exactly what I was hoping would happen." She just showed the judge her true personality. When court resumed, Leonard presented the final piece of evidence. The complete forensic audit showing Talia's attempted account manipulation and fraudulent document creation. "Your Honor, this audit proves that Mrs. Keaton has committed multiple felonies in her attempt to steal her father-in-law's assets." The evidence was overwhelming. Forged signatures, fake power of attorney documents, unauthorized credit applications, and attempted account transfers. She didn't just plan to manipulate Mr. Keaton into signing over control. She was actively stealing from him while building her legal case. Talia's lawyer had no response to the forensic evidence. The documentation was too clear, too comprehensive, and too damning. Furthermore, Leonard continued, the court-ordered cognitive evaluation proves that Mr. Keaton is fully competent to manage his affairs. Any claims of mental incompetence are false. The judge reviewed the evaluation report and the evidence of fraud with equal attention. "This court has rarely seen such clear documentation of attempted elder exploitation," she said. I could see Talia trembling in her seat, finally understanding that her plan had failed completely. The judge was ready to make her ruling, and everyone in the courtroom knew which way it was going to go. The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that Thomas Keaton is fully competent to manage his own affairs. The cognitive evaluation clearly demonstrates that he has the mental capacity to make his own financial decisions. Talia's face went white as the implications sank in. Furthermore, this court finds that Talia Keaton acted with malicious intent to defraud and exploit an elderly family member. Her actions constitute multiple felonies. Therefore, this court orders the following. Thomas Keaton shall retain total control of all his assets. Talia Keaton is permanently banned from accessing or attempting to influence any of Thomas Keaton's financial accounts or decisions. The judge looked directly at Talia. "Mrs. Keaton, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. You may face charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Additionally, Mr. Keaton is awarded full legal fees and damages for the emotional distress caused by this fraudulent action." Colton couldn't even look at his wife as the reality of her crimes became clear. The judge concluded, "This court hopes this case serves as a reminder that attempting to exploit elderly family members will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." It was over. Justice had won. As we left the courtroom, Talia stormed out ahead of us, screaming threats and accusations at anyone who would listen. Her carefully planned scheme had backfired completely, and now she faced both civil and criminal consequences. Colton approached me hesitantly in the hallway, his face pale and ashamed. "Dad," he whispered, "I didn't know it would go this far. I thought she was just trying to help you." I looked at my son, seeing the man I had raised somewhere underneath his wife's manipulation. "Colton, you helped her try to steal everything your mother and I worked for. You stood by while she humiliated me and treated me like I was incompetent. I was scared of her. She said if I didn't support her, she would leave and take the kids. You chose her over your father." He started to cry. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." I felt both sadness and relief. Sadness for the son who had been manipulated into betraying his family. relief that the truth was finally out. Colton, you have some serious thinking to do about your marriage and your choices. I walked away without another word, leaving him to face the consequences of what he had allowed to happen. Back home that evening, I sat in my quiet living room, the house finally peaceful again. The legal documents granting me total control of my assets lay on the coffee table, signed by a judge and sealed with official authority. I won, I said aloud to my wife's photograph. I protected what we built together. I thought about all the people who had underestimated me because of my age. They had seen an elderly widower and assumed I was weak, confused, and easy to manipulate. They had been wrong about everything. I signed the final estate documents with steady hands, updating my will to ensure that people who had tried to steal from me would never benefit from my life's work. Then I turned toward you, the people who had followed this story from the beginning. Know your worth, I said firmly. Protect your legacy, and never let anyone convince you that age makes you weak. I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by the silence of justice served and a battle won. Age had brought me wisdom. Experience had taught me strategy. And truth had given me victory over those who tried to destroy what I had spent a lifetime building. The house was mine. The money was mine. And the peace was finally mine as well.